They have finally, the government, decided to tell some of the truth about, wait for it, Brexit! They finally decided to start telling some of the truth about Brexit. There was an early clue when Keir Starmer referred to the lies on a side of a bus, wasn't there? The bus that Boris Johnson denied he'd ever been near, despite being photographed, not quite in the driver's seat, but very much in the immediate vicinity. And Rachel Reeves is taking up the baton, going in a lot harder than people expected, or let's just say even harder than people expected on this. She wants Brexit to be very much front and centre when she lays out the tax and spending decisions that she is required to make. She is stressing repeatedly that leaving the European Union was turning out to have caused even more damage than official forecasters had previously outlined. She expects, I think, a sharp downgrade in growth forecasts from the Office for Budgetary Responsibility, and the big players there will be cuts to capital spending and Brexit, and with a side order of austerity, because their impact on our economy was even bigger than was projected back then. This was at an investment event in Birmingham yesterday, and she said, that is why we are unashamedly rebuilding our relations with the EU. That's not a policy change, really, until she puts flesh on the bones of what they're going to do differently, but it is a... what would you call it? A tonal change, I suppose. It's a change in tone. It's a change in rhetoric. It's a change in emotion. Closer relations reduce some of these costs. But here is the point. Keir Starmer speaking out about the damage of Brexit. Rachel Reeves pointing out that if she puts, or when she puts taxes up, she will be doing so at least in part because of the £4 billion a year or so, quite probably more, that it continues to cost us. Also, of course, on a political level, reminding people that Nigel Farage, currently leading in the polls, arguably did more to bring about this disastrous turn of events than anybody else in UK politics. And the question I've got for you is it usually falls into two spaces. And remember, if you don't ring in, I've got another 15 minutes of this. I could talk about this subject forever. It falls into two spaces. There is, will it work, as in introducing the word, bringing it back into the front. The biggest indication of how big a deal it is the volume with which the people who caused it tell you not to talk about it. You get the same thing with Trump. If you've ushered a self-confessed sex offender and fascist into the White House, you're going to come up with a phrase like Trump derangement syndrome to describe people who've got a real problem with self-confessed sex offenders and fascists. So you can't say, oh, there's someone over there doing a really good job of calling out self-confessed sex offenders and fascists. You have to come up with a name that's pejorative. So you say, oh, Trump derangement syndrome. Hashtag. And the same with Brexit. If you said it would be a good idea, if you told your listeners or your readers or your voters that Brexit was going to be a good idea, and now you are confronted with Everests of evidence that it was the absolute bloody disaster that anybody with a brain knew it would be, you can't say, oh, well played you lot, you were right and I was wrong, I'm a blooming idiot. I'm pretending to be a patriot when I've inflicted more damage on this country than anybody since the Luftwaffe. You have to come up with an insult to describe the people who've been proved right about everything. So where Trump derangement syndrome leads, Brexit derangement syndrome follows. Except you hear more of the first and the second, because the other thing that they do, the saboteurs, the liars, the crooks, the snake oil salesmen and the charlatans, the other thing they do is say, oh, we don't want to talk about that anymore. That glorious victory that we spent hours trumpeting, days, weeks, months claiming was the best thing that had happened to Britain in decades. Oh, no, we don't want to talk about that anymore. Oh, just be quiet about that. We've all moved on. Oh, I don't want to talk about that. Well, why not? Well, it's obvious, isn't it? Because you did it. You let the tyres down. You drove us off a cliff. You turned us into the first population in history to impose economic sanctions on ourselves, all while waving flags and claiming to be patriotic. You did it. So I want you to tell me whether or not you think that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer should be going harder, heavier, pausing in the hope of coming up with another word beginning with H so that I can thump the desk again, but I've currently got nothing. Harder and heavier. And hell for leather? No. On Brexit. The point is, of course, that it's true. There's a great piece by Raphael Baer in The Guardian. It just says very simply, halfway through the article, of course this is true. Everybody that cares about evidence or follows the evidence knows that it is true. But our country is utterly, utterly absurd. Logan Roy would look us in the eye and say, you are not serious people. Our country has been rendered absurd by the events of 2016, the run-up to it and the aftermath, a collective delusion and a cowardice, perhaps, on the part of people committed to reality and evidence and truth. Not cowardice, but cowardness. So they finally, and I don't fully know why, probably because everything else has failed, they've broken the seal. They've rubbed the Brexit genie. They've rubbed the Brexit lamp, rather. And the genie has emerged to shout, it was all a terrible mistake and we're all going to have to start paying for it now. The years of denial and delusion are over. So, is it the right thing to do? Yes or no? Seriously. And in some ways, I'm more interested in no's, but not from idiots. So if you want to pretend Brexit was a good idea, I'm sure there's still a couple of radio programmes you can tune into, but this ain't one of them. Those arguments are over. It would be like having an argument about whether or not the Earth is flat or vaccines work. Again, there are still radio programmes you can ring, I'm sure, where those subjects are open to debate. But I just want to know whether or not you want them to do it. And then we'll have a small side order of whether or not it will work. Because in the first instance, I don't know whether it will work or not, and I don't care. Because you have to start telling the truth. Surely you have to start telling the truth as loudly as possible. Even if all the people over there are shouting, oh, shut up about it now, Brexit derangement syndrome. Or all the people over there are shouting, probably correctly, they're not going to let us rejoin anytime soon. What's the point of showing people this particular rabbit? To which the answer is, if the truth doesn't matter, nothing does. It might be a get-out-of-jail-free card for Rachel Reeves to blame some of the economic problems of this country on Brexit, but it's the truth for some of the economic problems. Do you want them to go in harder on what a blooming stupid idea Brexit was and how utterly irresponsible, untrustworthy and... that's the word I want, like for doing damage. Deleterious. No, that doesn't quite work. Destructive. There you go. Do you want them to go in harder on how bad Brexit was, what a stupid idea it was all along, how deleterious and damaging its effects have been, and how the people responsible for it have to be held to account? Otherwise, the madness continues and the lies will always prevail.